Hey folks, I'm 13. TT is for tabletop. New videos drop on the 13th of every month. Right now, this series of videos is doing a deep dive into how the action economy has shifted over the years in modern D&D and D&D adjacent games. Down the line, we'll branch out to other types of systems and totally different mechanics. Today, we're kicking things off with the history of the swift action. We'll look at its incredibly tangled relationship with the activate activity. Now, activate covers a ton of different things, like firing off magic items and stuff like that. But the absolute classic example is drinking a potion or administering a potion. Finally, we'll use interact and activate as sort of baseline to map out the differences between these major systems. Back in D&D 3e, a quicken spell was a free action that you can only use once per turn. But logically, if a free action has a hard limit, it's just another action resource. It's not actually free. As more expansions came out, the game kept adding more uses of this restricted free action until the late 3.5 era, when it was officially dubbed the swift action. But back then, drinking a potion was still a standard action. Those two mechanics weren't even in the same ballpark. Then we get to WotC's Star Wars role-playing game Saga Edition. This is where we first see the three-tier substitution. Standard action into move action into swift action. The swift action was officially cemented as the third tier action, which totally laid the groundwork for D&D 4e. This was also the first time that activating an item took a swift action. But since magic potions aren't really a thing in Star Wars, activate didn't carry the same weight it does in fantasy systems. That's probably why it was surprisingly cheaper in the action economy than an interact, which cost a move action. We'll actually cover the other uses of the Saga Edition Swift action in a separate video. In D&D 4e, drinking a potion finally dropped to a swift action, though by then they called it a minor action. What's weird is that administering a potion was still a standard action, which shows 4e only took partial inspiration from Saga Edition. And then, in later games like 13th Age, D&D 5e, and Tales of the Valiant, drinking a potion went right back to being a standard action. You can basically think of the 5e bonus action as the return of 3.5's swift action. You can't trade a standard action down for it, and originally, it had nothing to do with activate. But in Draw Steel, with its maneuver, history repeats itself. Not only do we get substitution back, main action to maneuver, but activate gets heavily devaluated to a second-tier maneuver. Meanwhile, D&D 5.5e is kind of in this weird transition phase. As a general rule, activate still takes an action, but certain items like potions and antidotes get a special pass to use a bonus action instead. But honestly, it's a huge quality of life update. Now let's look at action point systems. Mutants and Masterminds 1e doesn't really seem to have a clear activate rule, so we'll just skip that one. In Pathfinder 2e with potions and Starfinder 2e with serums, activation takes one action. By the time we get to Draconin, it's just a quasi-action. If you put activate and interact side by side in these AP systems, drinking a potion costs exactly the same as the basic interact. Rules-wise, drinking a potion is quite literally just treated as a type of interaction. On the other hand, traditional action type systems draw a hard line between activate and interact, with activate almost always costing more. Whether the system treats interact as a move action, swift action, or quasi-action, activate is usually hard-locked as a standard action. Even when activate was eventually downgraded to a maneuver, interact also dropped down to a free maneuver, so activate still stayed on top. The DC-20 Nimble model uses action points, but Activate costs 1 AP, while Interact is a quasi-action. There's a clear division, and Activate is more costly than Interact, which, as we pointed out, is a hallmark of an action-type system. So when these games are called 5e but better or 5e compatible, it actually makes a lot of sense. Deep down in their core design, they still share some DNA with the D&D 5e family. In our last video, we grouped these systems together by looking at how they handle the interact activity. Moving forward, we're going to split the DC-20 Nimble model and the Draconin model into 2 separate families, making 8 families in total. Down the line, we'll see how these 2 families handle a bunch of mechanics in completely different ways. If you like this kind of content, please like, subscribe, and support my Patreon. Until next time, may all your loot be heavy.